You're 15 years old and you come up with an idea for a virtual reality headset in your garage.
So I started with the idea, and it was because I was really interested in virtual reality as a concept because I was a gamer, right? And I had been modding retro consoles, modding modern consoles, and I'd gotten into PC gaming. And then one day I'm sitting there with my 6 monitor setup, right? So I'm on my PC, I've got my 6 monitors all set up, and my display spanned across all of them for flight simulators and stuff. And I said, okay, what's the next step? Like, what am I doing next? And I already had this dual graphics card 6 monitor setup. I was like, I don't know. Like, I honestly don't know what the next step is. It's not 8 monitors, it's not 12 monitors, right? And it became clear to me, it crystallized in that moment. I was 15 years old, and I thought to myself, sitting at my computer, the next step is not interesting. I should be thinking, what's the final step in gaming, right? Where's this all, not what am I doing this summer with my PC game, but like, where's this all going in the long run? And it was obvious, it's immediately obvious, right? It's virtual reality. It's the ability to feel like you're literally inside of the video game, to feel like it is reality. And whatever technology makes that possible, that's clearly where this is all going someday. There's disagreement as to when, but I don't think anyone would believe like, oh no, gaming is like never going to get there. Nobody wants, it's obviously what's gonna happen. And that's why it's such a science fiction staple. So I started working on VR when I was 15 years old. I built my first prototype headset myself when I was 16 years old. So it took me a while to learn about VR, to try a bunch of old VR tech. I read a whole bunch of old patents from the 80s and 90s. I was reading all of these academic studies about VR. I was reading all these military research papers about virtual reality. So I was like, I was just like downloading into my brain everything I could about what worked, what didn't. And I my first few prototypes, like the prototype I made when I was 16, I'll be honest, it was really terrible.
I mean, you're 16 years old.
I was
What
16
were you
years
doing
old.
when you were 16?
No, that's what I was gonna say. It's crazy how at 15 you're like experimenting with this virtual reality tech. Like
I was
when
humping
Mike
pillows.
was 15, he was experimenting with opiates.
No, not that young. No,
Well,
not that young. It took me a couple years. I was selling half ounces of swag. And I remember right when I turned 16, I crashed my grandmother's Jetta into the back of a Civic. And the Civic actually went over the top of the car and I had to run because I had the weed on me. And right around that time in his life, he was designing virtual reality headsets.
Well, I was doing something else too. So here's the crazy overlap. Here's the crazy overlap. Also, when I was 15 was when I started Mod Retro. So I launched Mod Retro as this forum for people who were modding Game Boys, Nintendo 64s.
Whoa.
So we were combining modern technology with retro consoles. So I started that when I was 15, and it actually ended up going pretty well. Like, we were getting millions of page views a month with people's projects, building portable Nintendo 64s, custom painted Game Boys, backlit Game Boys. People building MP3 players and 8-track cassettes. It was a lot of cool
What
stuff.
year is this?
This would have been like 2000.
Let's just root this.
Like 2008.
So 2008.
Yep.
So this is post Napster?
Oh yeah, definitely post Napster. This was like
Post-Napster.
2008 or 2009. I need to go check the date.
What is the state of, because for people that don't, maybe you could lay it out. For people who don't understand the timeline that is virtual reality, what is the state of VR in 2008 and how far
that's a
had
good
it come?
point.
Because the first VR was introduced in 1956, I believe it was.
Well,
it's some semblance.
It
of
depends
VR?
on on who you ask. There was the Sword of Damocles, which is this kind of widely credited as the first VR rig. There was the Sensorama, which was this kind of
Sensorama,
So you might be thinking of the Sensorama, which is this static thing. It wasn't head worn, but you put your head into it.
Got it.
I mean, the reality is VR had been a failure. There had never been a successful VR company in history. They'd all gone bankrupt. They had all done quite poorly because I think honestly the tech was never quite ready. And also people had not done it quite the right way. It was a combination of the two. The headsets were never ready, but also computers were not good enough to push high resolution, photorealistic graphics at a high enough frame rate, or even crude graphics, honestly.
A lot of big sneakerheads on this podcast. Speed, Patrick Mahomes, me, even Mike. Sneakers are very important to us. And when it comes to feet, eBay has got your back. When I train for WWE, my sneakers are important to me. They help me feel unstoppable. I'm jumping off the top rope, whether it's Adidas, Solomon's, a classic pair of Air Force Ones. eBay is keeping an eye out on what's coming next. With eBay Authenticity Guarantee, real experts are checking your sneakers, every single stitch down to the sole. So whatever you're adding to the lineup next, go to eBay. From the drop to your doorstep, eBay doesn't play games with your sneaker game. Just look for that blue check mark. The sneakers you love, checked by experts. Ensure your next purchase is the real deal. Visit ebay.com for terms. back to the show.
So like, yeah, I start Mod Retro. I'm working on all this game console stuff. I use a lot of that self-taught electronics engineering knowledge to then build my first VR headset when I'm 16. It's terrible.
From reading papers.
Reading papers,
Got it.
also buying a lot of old hardware. So back then, old VR headsets were dirt cheap because nobody was collecting them. I was probably the only guy in the whole world collecting them. So I'm going on eBay and I'm looking at all of this stuff being sold by like medical facilities shutting down that have some headset that was used as part of a research trial in the late 90s. And like, I'm buying this stuff that they bought for literally hundreds of thousands of dollars for less than $100. I mean, like, I bought it. I ended up building this like collection of old hardware and I'm taking it apart, I'm learning from it, realizing what worked, what didn't. And so when I built my first headset, I called it PR1, Prototype 1. And that way it was kind of like, I'm putting a stake in the ground. Like, this is the first thing I'm building. It was a wide field of view virtual reality headset, 3D compatible, but it also weighed like 6 or 7 pounds. It was this huge helmet that went on your head. It was so uncomfortable, so ungainly, but it was kind of the first thing that proved, oh shit, this experience, like the visual side, is clearly way better than gaming on a monitor. And so I kept working on it, building new prototypes. And then I did that for years. And then when I was 18 years old, so almost 3 years later, I had been showing prototypes to my friends for years, and they all thought I was kind of off my rocker, right? Like, I wish I could say my friends were supportive, but they're not. So like shout out to Chris for being an asshole. Yeah. And being like,
Shout out Chris. Where's Chris now?
You know, so it's fun. We'll come back to Chris.
Pin Chris, dude.
We'll come back to Chris. But like, I remember showing to Chris, and his honest feedback was like, yeah, I don't know, like, it's cool, man, but I don't really get it. Like, cool that you're into it, I guess.
Wait, what were your friend types back then? Was he?
No, he's a hardcore turbo nerd, just like me. Like retro game. He was building portable Nintendo 64s, portable NESs. Okay, I'll tell you why. Every prototype that I had shown him up to this one that I made when I was 18 was honestly not very inspiring unless you had a really good imagination. You had to imagine where it was going. And then when I showed it to people, and it was the first prototype that I'd ever shown them where they said, oh shit, I finally get it. That's when I started Oculus. So I started my company after I showed it to people and said, they finally, instead of saying, I don't get it, they said, holy shit, I finally get that this is going somewhere. And so I started Oculus and ended up doing a Kickstarter for that. And we were really successful. We hit our goal in like 2 hours. And we ended up making this incredible headset, working with a bunch of game developers, getting it all out there. And of course, in the long run, ended up selling that to Facebook for a few $1 billion. That's where I got my money. And woo.
That's insane, Paul.
Back to Chris. So I said, I got to call up my buddy Chris and point out, like he didn't get it when I showed him the first few prototypes because they weren't very good. But to his credit, he was the first employee at Oculus.
No way.
Oh, nice.
So I called him up and I said, hey, Chris, what are you doing this summer? He said, oh, I'm going to work at this pizza place and get ready to go to college. And I said, no, you're not. You're going to come work with me and we're going to build this company, Oculus, to commercialize my VR headset now that the tech's finally good. And that was, I think, a Friday. And I called him and he said, okay, I'll do it. And then he told his mom that he's not going to college. Instead, he's joining this online buddy of his, Palmer's company. And she just didn't take it seriously. So that's Friday. Monday, I roll up in my minivan. He gets into my minivan with all the shit from his room. And that's it. He moved out with me and we moved into an old, near condemned motel. And that's where we built the first prototype that we used for the Oculus Kickstarter.
How much did he make on the exit?
He made plenty.
Isn't it crazy? Because when you start a multi-billion-dollar brand like that, dude, you gotta make sure that you're taking care of your friends.
Look,
you know what I'm saying?
So Chris was there at the very beginning, and then he actually, when I started Andro, my weapons company, he was also the first employee.
No way!
Yeah.
Oh, Chris
you gotta do it.
When Facebook fired me, Chris was the first person he posted internally at Facebook, and he said, "This is fucked up. I can't believe you guys did
Chris
this.
got fired.
You guys are a bunch of lying assholes. The way you treated Palmer is obscene." And I'm out of here. I'm the first employee of Oculus, and I guess I'm out of here.
You know what I like about Chris is that he trusted in his buddy, who's a visionary, and he followed him to the depths of hell and heaven.
Dude,
whatever it ended up being.
Loyalty is important. I mean, Chris is loyal to me, and I'm loyal to Chris. And
you offered him the opportunity, right? And
that's right.
But the difference between Chris and some people that I know is that Chris took that opportunity.
Well, and the difference, you remember, I didn't leave Oculus. I was fired. So Facebook, it was like Chris.
Did you happen
Chris,
to, you
Chris,
didn't move the whole operation to like an island in the middle of the Atlantic,
No.
right? Like you guys stayed put in your generalized area.
we started in Orange County, but
Okay.
actually we moved up to the Bay Area. So we're at Facebook
just like
HQ.
a little bit of a shorter trip.
But like to your point about loyalty, like he was sticking with me when I was down, and when people were kicking me, and when everyone was saying, they were like, you should have seen what people were saying. Nobody was saying, oh, Palmer's like going to do this incredible next thing. They're like, Palmer's fucking out. He's a one-hit wonder. Well, he's a loser. He's a nobody. Oh God, he deserved. Yeah, you've been through this, right? It's like, okay, so imagine this. Imagine you're at your lowest where everyone thinks you're damaged goods and they need to distance themselves. And imagine to not just stick with somebody, but to go up publicly and say, you guys are treating this guy unfairly and you're horrible for it.
Yes.
There's not a lot of friends like that you'll find in the world. You got to stick with those people.
You do have to stick with those people. And I hope today or one day that I'm going to be in a position where I can hook up my friends and the people who have supported me from day one.
With jobs.
With
100%.
jobs.
Well, look, everybody at Oculus who was around in those early days is now financially independent. And that's what people will often say, like, Palmer, would you undo it, right? Like you got fired, you wish you could go back. And the real answer is, on the one hand, I think how it turned out for me, not so great maybe, but for all of those people, I would not go back and undo that for them, right? It was a life-changing thing to have financial independence, the ability to have enough money to not have to work so you can work on whatever you want. Or even if that something is nothing, that's huge.
Hey guys, if you like that clip, hit the subscribe button. And if you want to see more zany clips, click the video right here.